What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 530. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, you all ready for the Players Tour coming up this weekend?
Oh yeah, I played a ton in preparation for this, and I'm pretty happy with where things have landed. I guess this is going up after decks are due, so I'm going to be playing the Lotus Breach combo deck, the Underworld Breach, Lotus Field, Hidden Strings combo deck. Did want to play blue-white, like I tweeted. You know, my heart really wanted to play blue-white, but couldn't end up getting there. Didn't get enough of my teammates on board, and I think it's important to kind of trust your team. That's why you have a team. And when I'm basically the only person out of 15 people of whom I respect greatly, I'm not testing with BK to be clear, then I would be foolish to not pay attention to that. And it also did really poorly in the other players' tours. Plus, the Lotus Breach deck is just really, really good. It's the kind of deck I like playing control decks, but I love playing combo decks. So I'm really happy with this deck.
All right. And of course, you've been putting in a ton of time on booster draft as well. So I know you feel comfortable in the format.
Oh, yeah. I drafted
tons.
I would say a lot.
Would you say you overdrafted? Is that?
I don't think I overdrafted. I think I kind of overprepared for the tournament in that I didn't overprepare in the sense that, like, I don't regret how much time I spent playing, but I played more because of how fun both formats were. I think if you like Constructed and haven't tried Pioneer, it is honestly a blast. I've just loved playing it. And then this draft format has been fantastic too. The combination means I've actually done more preparation than I kind of like needed to or would make sense to, given, you know, how many tournaments there are this year and what the stakes of the tournaments are. I'm not going to prepare this much for every single one. I just can't. It just happened that I got to spend my preparation time preparing for the tournament, and then my leisure time, turns out I also wanted to spend a lot of that doing the same. So
yeah.
It's kind of like the saying, right? If you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. Even though I don't actually find that to be particularly true. That's not how it really works anyway. But
when the formats line up, you'll jam. There's no doubt about that.
But when the formats don't line up, I will jam. And it is, and I would be lying if I said it was just because of the tournament. The tournament's a good excuse. I just wanted to play these formats.
Yeah, cool. Well, good luck in the tournament. We'll get a report from you on the other side next week when we're done. When you're done with the tourney, I'll be there covering it as well. And that should be a fun one. So this week on the show, we've got Aggro in Theros Beyond Death. Is it good? Is it viable? How do you draft it? What are the colors that want to be aggressive? What are the ones that don't? But usually you'd think that they're aggro. We're going to cover all that today. And we've also got a little bit of a twist on Crack-A-Pack for you as well this week. Before we get into that, first, got to mention our sponsor, channelfireball.com. That's the place to go for all things Magic related on the internet, including, I don't know if you guys saw this, but they've got a new unset coming out called Unsanctioned. And I was actually looking at some of the cards from it because I haven't really kept up on it super well. And there's some really funny stuff in here. These sets are, especially if you're like a hardcore Magic player, there's a lot of inside jokes for Magic players in there, referencing other cards, people, tournaments, events, things like that. Really fun. And you can pre-order it right now on Channel Fireball. Also, one of the big selling points to these are, of course, the lands that you can get from them. They have unsanctioned now lands, which are a take on the unglued lands. They look somewhat similar in framing, and they are much better looking overall, in my opinion, and they are actually really good looking. I don't like the unglued lands really at all. So
I think the new lands look pretty sweet.
Yeah, they did a good job. They're not going to knock off any all-timers, but...
No, the Theros lands also look really good, by the way. Yes. I actually really like how they look. The just full mana symbol enchantment-y looking lands, I think they look sweet.
Me too. I'm a little like I had a little pushback on them when they came back because I was just like, but there's no land, like it's not a land, right? It's just like a mana symbol kind of in space or enchantment land or whatever. But you get them in your hand and they really do resonate. They just look really cool. They just did a good job executing. So if you're going to do something a little different, hey, at least do it well. And I think they definitely did.
I might have to update the basic land power rankings.
Come on. They're not breaking into that. Or are they? Anyway.
No,
but Unsanctioned is on pre-order right now at channelfireball.com. So head over there and get those ordered. The last time they did an unset, it was very draftable. I'm assuming this one will be as well. So that could be fun. And then, of course, the Patreon. Patreon.com/limited resources is where you can go to support the show directly. There's a bunch of different tiers. You can pick whatever one you want. You can do partial tiers. You can jump around between tiers. You basically get to tailor it however you want to fit, how it fits for you. And that's how we want it to be set up that way. I never want to have people feel forced in any way to contribute in that way or to stay contributing or whatever. We want it to fit your lifestyle, to fit where you're at in the world and that kind of thing. And we really do appreciate everybody that heads on over and supports us on the Patreon. It means the world to us. Speaking of the Patreon question.
To you.
Ooh, to both of us. Jesus. The Patreon question of the week is something that you can get as well. This one comes from Spencer, who says, thanks to this podcast, I've improved massively in all areas of Magic, but have definitely fallen in love with Limited. Perfect. That's exactly what we want to hear, Spencer. He says, however, I have reached a sort of plateau where I'm having difficulty deciphering whether my wins and losses are due to bad luck, where I couldn't have done anything differently, or some subtle mistake that I don't realize I'm making. So how does one identify non-obvious holes in their gameplay without coaching or somebody standing over their shoulder? I know one thing I like to do, which is basically to get somebody to stand over my shoulder. And the way that the easiest way to do that is to take screenshots if you're playing online, or even just record yourself playing online and then go over your match with yourself or with a friend, somebody that you know is a little better than you or that could offer a different perspective. It is terrifyingly eye-opening to watch yourself play. And anybody who makes draft videos like I do for Channel Fireball, and you do too, Luis, it is insane how many mistakes I make that I'm not even aware of. And I'm like, wow, I did not know I was this loose in this aspect of the game, and I can see patterns start to form and that kind of thing. And of course, my dear viewers are so keen to point out every mistake I make.
Well, I was going to say, if you ever stream, you will be informed very quickly about the things you do right or wrong, or both of those things, but also in error. Chat lethal is a real thing.
Oh yeah.
I think besides getting someone to actually look at you, I think you can spend some time watching other people play. I think that's an important part of your development too. I think Marshall's videos are great. Draft videos in general are pretty good. Streams are good too. One of the good recommendations is Ben S. Ben Stark. He goes over things in excruciating detail. So
he does.
If that's what you're interested in, which a lot of people are, I've watched the stream and I enjoy it, but I can only take so much of Ben because of how detailed he goes over things. But that's actually great if you're trying to get better at Limited. And
you're not exactly the target audience.
No, I mean, I am at basically near the beginning of the format. I tend to watch Ben more later in the format. Like I don't need to hear why Escape is good, for the 17th time or whatever. But I think it ends up being a really welcoming experience for people who are just tuning in and are looking to get better. I think Ben's stream does a pretty good job of that. I also try when I stream or do draft videos to explain a sufficient amount that you'll get something out of it. So I think that's a good way of doing it. And then of course, like you said, Marshall, getting someone else to watch you play, whether it's a friend or whatever.
Yeah, I did that going all the way back to the beginning of when I first started playing Limited, and it was helpful from the immediate get-go. And then, like I said, it's kind of crowdsourced for me, but yeah. A
big part of the reason that you ended up here and why you're doing this is because you and Ryan both value improvement a lot.
Right.
And
exactly.
I think that was the genesis of the podcast itself. So
it was, yeah.
That is not surprising. That's something you sought out.
Yeah. So good luck with that, Spencer. Thanks for the note. So instead of doing a normal Crack-A-Pack, we're going to bang through, 8 or 10 of these pack one, pick ones. So we're not going to read every single card. We're just going to read kind of the headliners for them.
And these were sent in by users.
Exactly.
Viewers, whatever.
Yeah. Because
Twitter users, I guess, was what I meant.
Twitter people. Yeah. Because, we get these a lot. Like if you look at our feed, like what we're seeing, when people at us or include us on tweets or whatever, there's a lot of what should I take here, right? That is a very common thing for Luis and I, and oftentimes Ben or Siggy, or, there's a bunch of people that'll get tagged in these things. And so I figured, since these are curated in a way, right? Like, people aren't sending us just no-brainers for the most part. At least there's a discussion to be had. We go through a bunch of these. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to read the contenders. I'm not going to go over every single card in the pack, because this is meant to be kind of a one or two or three cards sort of, and we'll decide between them there. So this first one we have has, let's see, Hateful Eidolon. And then I actually can't remember what that other card's called. Dang it. Is it Remorse? Something Remorse? What is the Thoughtseize called?
Agonizing Remorse, yeah.
Agonizing Remorse, yeah. So those are the two black uncommons. There's also Mogus's Favor in the pack. Let's see. Anything else worth noting here?
Warbriar Blessing.
Warbriar Blessing and Omen of the Forge.
Omen of the Forge. I would just take Hateful Eidolon here. This isn't a great pick one, pack one, in the sense that it's not very powerful, but I've been impressed by Hateful Eidolon. I'm at the point where I'll play it with one Mogus's Favor in my deck and basically no other combos. And it is not hard to pick up like two Myers Grasps or whatever. So.
Oops, I just switched those. There we go. Yeah, I like that too. Hateful Eidolon definitely has the most upside, and also you want to be in black. So there you go.
Yeah, a quick note too is the Binding of the Titans has gone up in my estimation as an escape enabler that also just, get a Raised Dead is just a really powerful effect in this format. So if you're in black green, I do like that card. I would never take it here. It wouldn't be near the top of my list at all, but I do think it is a card worth mentioning.
Okay. The next pack we have has Thassa's Oracle, which is a card I know you're a big fan of, in Limited particularly. It also has, let's see, what are the other options here?
Staggering Insight, the blue-white Curiosity enchantment. Nessian Wanderer, the 1/3 that has Constellation, look at your top 3 for a land. And Thirst for Meaning, really the only relevant common that I would consider here. Yeah,
what do you like here? The Hydra enchantment you don't like at all, right? In this,
no, I think Hydra's Growth it's a card that you can play in green-white if you've got like multiple Karametra's Blessings, but it's just not a card that works very quickly, and it makes you super vulnerable. There are some times when it's going to be great. I've lost to that card, but it's, I think, a card that's not a very good bet overall.
Okay. Well, my eyes immediately go to a couple of cards here. Three of them, really. The Thassa's Oracle is a card I would consider here because of how easy it is to mill yourself out. And, we've had discussions on the show, and if you've seen them on other websites, social media, Ben's stream, etc., about us playing now more than 40 cards sometimes to try to avoid this. Well, if you pair blue with black, you can actually turbo through your deck fairly quickly. And Thassa's Oracle, particularly if you can pick up a few Omen of the Deads, is a really good way to win a game. It is very difficult to interact with, as many fans of Pioneer found out over the weekend. In Constructed, and in Limited, it's even harder. So I would definitely consider that. And then I really like Insight as well. The fact that it's gold, does bring it down a little bit for me here and makes me less likely to take it. I like the Wanderer fine also, but I like the upside on the Oracle, and I would actually take it here.
Yeah, I would also take the Oracle. I think starting with a monocolor card is better, and I found it to be just an incredibly good win condition.
It's a really legitimate win condition. It is. You do have to build around it, but if you don't, it's still a fine Magic card. You can play this.
You largely want to be blue-black for the reason you mentioned, Omen of the Dead. And because blue-black's a really good long game control deck. But blue-green can also use it pretty effectively because a green Constellation deck, playing cards like Nessian Wanderer, Nexus Wardens to gain a bunch of life, be defensive and all that. And
Relentless Pursuit, those type of cards to just dump.
Yeah, Relentless Pursuit also works. And you don't really want to be white-blue or white-red if you start with Oracle, though you could, of course. It's also just a fine card to play in any blue.
Right. So. You can put it in your deck if you want, but we're looking to maximize on it. Okay. Next one. This one's got the big pig, Nessian Boar. The big 10-6 is in here as well. The Triumph of Annex, which I haven't been super impressed by. Let's see, what's second place? Oh, I don't really see one, actually. Omen of the Sea, Enemy of Enlightenment.
There's really only two other cards I would even look at, which is Hero of the Pride and Omen of the Sea. But I think even though the Boar is a risky card, I think it's still an okay one. Like I don't mind starting with Boar because there's a couple of good combos. One is like giving it evasion with like the wings, or like if you get Eutropia, the twice favored, the blue-green uncommon, or giving it trample, Setessan training. Yep. And then the other is just combining it with removal, so where they don't have very many creatures in play when you play the Boar. Because if this is just gunning down their big, like they have one creature out when you attack them, like because you killed their other creature, it eats it, they draw a card. Next turn, they play like one creature. You can just keep doing that and you'll end up ahead because all your other creatures are getting through and you're casting spells and whatnot.
Yeah, and I mean, the hidden mode on Nessian Boar also is to play it on a fairly well-developed board and then just not attack with it for a few turns while you add enough power to the board to make it lethal. And that doesn't have to be that much, if you've gotten off to a quick start, especially in like a red-green deck or something, the Nessian Boar can just be a lure creature, going all the way back to alpha where everything must block it. Everything else gets through. It can be over in one swing. I mean, you can just end the game where they go block with everything, draw 5 cards. You're like, cool, take 18. Like you're if you don't have any way to interact here, you're just dead. So, that mode does win games as well. I agree with you. The Boar feels a little risky, but I think it's proven itself to be a really strong player in the format. And whenever it comes down, I'm like, crap, like I have to do a whole lot of things or hope the top of my deck is kind to me to make this work. And it doesn't take a lot to get it over the top. So I would take Boar here, like kind of easily, I think. Yeah, easily. Okay.
That wasn't a soundboard. I manufactured that myself.
Good old fashioned soundboard coming from Luis there. Next one. Enigmatic Incarnation is the rare. That's the 2 green blue. And at the beginning of your end step, you can sacrifice an enchantment and go get a creature from your deck that is equal to 1+ that thing's mana cost at least, and put it on the battlefield. That's the rare. There's also Staggering Insight in this pack as well as Impending Doom. Daybreak Chimera is here. There's an Ichthyomorphosis. Early in the format, I would have said the Eleusinian Caryatid, but it dies way too much to be a reliable source. I still put it in my green decks, but I just don't prioritize it in draft. So the real question is, to me, there's 2 really good gold cards and and 2 decent non-gold cards. If I'm going to take a gold card, I'm going to take Enigmatic Incarnation. I think the card's just good. Like, you do have to build around it. It's not the type of card that you can just throw into any deck, but it's easy to build around it. It's really easy. Like, blue-green is the constellation deck anyway. It has tons and tons of enchantments. So you are going to end up with some just by playing blue and green cards. And if you just keep an eye on a few extras here and there, an Omen of the Hunt can become a 4-drop creature while getting you some value, for example. Or, this is another deck where Setessan Training all of a sudden cantrips, constellations you, and then becomes a 3-drop. Like these things, add up pretty quickly on your side. I would take it over Staggering Insight just based on pure power level. And then while I don't mind Daybreak Chimera or Ichthyomorphosis, neither of them are really aiming for the stars enough for me to get me off of just going, you know what, I'm just going to take Incarnation here and see where I can go. One last point is that Enigmatic Incarnation is green. And that means that, you get access to Eleusinian Caryatid perhaps, or the Omen of the Hunt. And that allows you to splash it potentially even if you're in a different color.
Yeah, I would take Staggering Insight.
So what's your take on it? You think it's a higher upside? What, are you just trolling me? What's going on?
I was going to try to get away with just doing that, but I guess I should explain myself.
No. Welcome to limited resources, my friend.
Sorry, I was trying to get in the mindset of how I answer these on Twitter, where I usually just say like insight.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? I think people are fine with that. I do the same, by the way. Yeah, it's like they know you're busy.
I agree with much of what you said about Enigmatic Incarnation. I actually do think it's a legit card to take early. I think it's a powerful card. I think it really can get you some pretty good value. I also think Staggering Insight is just a really, really powerful card. And I would probably take the Insight here, but I think it's close enough that I wouldn't fault you for taking either. I just found Insight to be the best reason to be blue-white. Well, sorry, the best non-rare reason to be blue-white, because I think we can think of a better one we can only dream of. But if you end up like, and we'll talk about this later actually, if you end up as essentially where I want to be when I play aggro, which is mono white aggro with like 3 to 5 cards of a secondary color, Staggering Insight's just so good in those decks with, you Karametra's Blessing and Starlit Mantle to protect it. You have Transcendent Envoy to give you a nice little flyer. So I like Staggering Insight. I would start with it here. I find it more reliably to be good, whereas in Enigmatic Incarnation, you need to get a pretty well set up sequence of things before it's good, which is you need a good curve of creatures, a good curve of enchantments, those things to line up. And enough good value enchantments. Because if you're sacking like a Grove Dancer to go get a 3-drop, that's not very good. Right. Like you said, you want to sack Test and Training or Omen of the Hunt to go get your 3s and 4s and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But sometimes you just don't end up with the right mix, and I found it to be somewhat inconsistent to the point where I would take Staggering Insight.
Okay. Yeah.
How's that for Staggering Insight?
That was beautiful. Well done. Well done. All right. Our next one has Perforos's Intervention. That's the red X sorcery, which, by the way, the first time I played it, I thought it was an instant. I was like, no. And it lets you do twice X damage to something or make an X1 elemental with trample and haste until end of turn. There's also Annex Hardened by the Forge in this pack, and a Theros Beyond Brawler. That's the 4GG 4/4 that fights when it enters the battlefield. So those are all fantastic. And then adding even more, there is a Mire's Grasp in the common slot as well as an Omen of the Forge. But, Mire's Grasp, Theros Beyond Brawler, and then the 2 red cards, Perforos's Intervention and Annex Hardened by the Forge, or Hardened in the Forge. What do you like out of all these?
I actually remember answering this one. I would take Perforos's Intervention. There's a couple reasons. One, it's very flexible, where this kills any creature. I mean, at dealing double X means this kills anything. This isn't like a deal 4. This could be a deal 10 if you needed it to be. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have a good target or they're low on life, you can actually just kill them. You can just go off with just make a 6/1 trample and attack them. And it's splashable. It only costs a single red. It's very easy to imagine wanting to splash this card. So I think it's better than Mire's Grasp. And I would first pick Mire's Grasp over Annex or Theros Beyond Brawler for what it's worth. My ordering here is Intervention, followed by Mire's Grasp, followed by Annex, followed by Theros Beyond Brawler.
Okay, so you have Brawler last on that list.
I do. The reason is it's a 6-drop. It's expensive, and if you're black-green, the Blight Breath Catoblepus is a good approximation of it. I don't think you're going to miss it, feel too bad. And they conflict with each other, right? So
They do.
So that means that in black-green, you don't need it that much. And then green-white doesn't want a 6-drop all that much. It's very good in blue-green. It's probably at its best in blue-green just because that's the deck that could use removal, and it draws out the game long enough that 6 isn't that hard. But and then in red green it's fine, but you just have all these other monsters in red green. Like, it's going to be good there. Look, I'm not saying Theros Beyond Brawler is bad. It's a good card. You'll play it every single time you draft it. But I just don't find it to be as high a priority in most of the color combinations. Whereas Mire's Grasp is just a card that is just so unbelievably good. This card is better than I first thought, and I initially thought it was the best black common. I already thought it was great. It has continuously overperformed for me. It
has better and better and better.
I mean, I would take Mire's Grasp over Banishing Light. Pick one, pack one.
Dang, all right. That says a lot. There you go. And by the way, I agree 100% about Perforos's Intervention as the pick for the reasons that you described. Next one. This one has Nylea Keen-Eyed. That's the 3 and a green 5/6 god. She's indestructible unless you have Devotion of 5 for green. And creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and you can pay 2 and a green to look at the top card of your library. And if it's a creature, you put it in your hand, otherwise in your yard. There's other cards. There's Doxos, Blessed by the Sun, which I haven't been super impressed by, unlike Timuret, which I love. Louise. There's also Nessian Hornbeetle. That's the 1 and a green 2/2. If you control a creature with power 4 or greater, it gets a +1/+1 counter at the beginning of combat. Yes, at the beginning of combat. Yep. And then there is a Mire's Grasp in this one, as well as an Erois's Blessing, the 3 and a red enchantment that gives your creature +1/+1. It does 4 to something. So I remember this one as well, and I actually answered that I would take Nylea Keen-Eyed for the big time upside. But Nylea Keen-Eyed is a little finicky. She is not necessarily a bomb. You do need to build around her at least a little bit by making sure you have a dense creature count, and she's rarely turned into a creature. They just, the devotion either doesn't happen that often or it doesn't stick when it does. So you don't get to count on that part. She dominates the late game. If you have even a remotely stable board, she will completely take over. You start activating her once or twice a turn. Then you'll even get to the point where you have enough mana to activate her and play a card because of the discount that you get. And then, of course, you're more likely to turn her into a 5/6. So there's a lot of upside to like there. But as far as bread and butter playables goes, your Mire's Grasp, your Rose's Blessing, heck, even your Beetle is going to be a little more consistent than that. But I like the upside, so I went for Nylea. What did you say?
I would probably take the Horn Beetle here. I think it's pretty close to Nylea, and I think Nylea is a good high upside first pick, but I found her to be one of the guys that impacts the board the least. Whereas compared to like Erebos or Heliod or Thassa, like the Perforos sucks, so he's distant fifth. But I think Nylea is not as good as those other ones. Where if you're not devoting to or devoted enough to Nylea, she's just not a good enough card to play. And I think the Horn Beetle's unbelievable. If you go Horn Beetle into Loathsome Chimera, you would basically win almost all of those games.
You have presented an extremely difficult spot for your opponent, no doubt about it.
And I think that it's also reasonable to consider Mire's Grasp there. I think any of Nylea, Horn Beetle, and Mire's Grasp are in the running. I don't think those are all very far ahead of Daxos, but I would lean towards taking Horn Beetle here and starting off there and biasing towards red green, but Horn Beetle's fine in any green deck, so it doesn't really lock you in.
Okay. Next one has Bronzehide Lion, which is the green-white 3/3 with all the activated ability and triggered ability when it dies and all that. There's also Shoal Kraken, Wolfwillow Haven, Dreadful Apathy, Final Death, and that's it. Lots of removal spells and some kind of finicky stuff. The real question here is, to me, are you willing to take... Yeah, exactly. Like, do you want Final Death, or maybe if you were so inclined, Dreadful Apathy, or do you want the Bronzehide Lion at gold? Given that, I mean, on raw power level, the Bronzehide Lion is more powerful than either of those commons, I think.
I would take Final Death followed by Dreadful Apathy followed by Bronzehide Lion. I think that taking a gold card first is just too risky when these cards are all close together. And the Bronzehide Lion hasn't actually impressed me that much. Look, it's a good card. It's an easy third pick out of this pack, and I think if I saw this pack after I had first picked a green or white card, I would be pretty heavily leaning towards wanting to take the Lion. But it also just gets brickwalled by any 4 toughness creature, and doesn't you have to have like pump spells along with it in order to make that work out a little bit better. So my inclination would be to just take Final Death here and then, take the splashable, powerful card in the best color rather than the gold card in a color combination I don't think is even that great.
Yeah, that's actually my inclination as well, is to take Final Death over the Bronzehide Lion. I think I have Bronzehide Lion above Dreadful Apathy a little bit. I don't know why. But I do, because I really do like the Lion. I think it's a strong card. But, man, there are situations that pop up somewhat frequently where they play Riptide Turtle, and you're like, oh, never mind. Right, there's my rare, just sitting there, meowing at the other side of the battlefield and not able to do anything. Now, it is in green-white, which is the number one aura pair, right? So you're going to be able to make this thing bigger, and it comes with a way to protect itself.
Once it tests in training, and we have a completely different ball game here. So it's not. I'm not saying the line sucks, but I just can't get behind taking a gold card here when you've got two pretty strong monocolor options that are also both easily splashable.
For sure. Okay, the next one, the land is a temple of plenty, so that's not where we're going to go with it. But it does have Nyx Herald of note at the uncommon slot. There's Omen of the Sea, Venomous Hierophant, and this is a very bad pack. Yeah, I would definitely take Nyx Herald out of this pack. There's just really nothing else.
Nyx Herald's just a good card. Not a good first pick, but it's a good card.
All right, this one, I don't know how this got in here.
This is a Thorn of Eldraine pack.
Yeah, I must have gone a little deep on my Twitter search there. All right, next one is Theros Beyond Death pack. Thank you very much. So it's got Protean Thaumaturge as the rare. That's the 1 and a blue 1/1 with Constellation. It clones something else and retains that ability to do so. It's also got Pharika's Spawn, maybe the best uncommon, one of the best uncommons in the set, as well as Dreadful Apathy, Final Death, as the other options. So, the big hitters here, Pharika Spawn, Final Death, Dreadful Apathy, and Protean Thaumaturge.
So what's going to come up a lot as I'm seeing these is the kind of the Mire's Grasp line, which is, if there's a Mire's Grasp in the pack, what do you take? What can compete with that? And then the gold versus monocolor line, where you've got these like powerful gold cards versus slightly less good monocolor cards. And again, this is pick one, pack one. That's where people tend to send us. Though I actually like when I get mid pack picks too, because I find those to be a little bit more challenging.
For sure. Yeah, people do that too. They say, this is what I've got. I actually culled those out for here because I figured it would be too hard to describe their deck.
Totally. We can probably get to that in another segment or another structure. Yeah. But in this particular case, I would just take Atris, the Oracle.
No. We're on the one above that.
Oh.
Yeah, so we're on Protean Thaumaturge, Pharika's Spawn. Yeah, you're just one ahead.
I just scrolled down one too many. That's why I was talking about Myers Grasp. This one's easy then, because Pharika's Spawn is the best uncommon in the set and better than almost every rare. So
I think I like Pharika's Spawn a lot here.
I don't think this totally good to ask about these things, especially if like the person who tweeted at us said that I think is the pick Final Death. I assume it's between that and Apathy. Not really knowing, I think, how good Pharika's Spawn is, which is kind of why we're being useful when we say Pharika's Spawn is an amazing card. You should take Pharika's Spawn.
Definitely. And I would for sure. Now, so we've made ourselves clear. We love Pharika's Spawn and would take it out of this pack. One question I do have is that, let's say it's gone. So now it's Final Death, Dreadful Apathy, Protean Thaumaturge. Where do you put Protean Thaumaturge on that list?
It's behind the other two. I mean, Protean Thaumaturge is a good card. I've definitely had good experiences with it, and I guess bad experiences against it. Like it's a powerful card, but it's not anything compared to just a monocolor removal spell. Like these unconditional removal spells are really good.
Okay. Yeah, I've had very good experiences with Protean Thaumaturge, but also struggle, like this listener, to really kind of sort out where it should be in the pecking order, because I haven't had a pack like this. But I really like the Protean Thaumaturge. One of the things that I've learned to do with it is to just hold it. You don't have to run it out on turn 2 and expose it to Amogus' Favor or whatever. You can wait until you also have, an enchantment or whatever, and then play it and play the enchantment at the same time, particularly if it happens to be an omen, because then you can really kind of make life difficult for your opponent. And when you have a good, target for it, you can switch it into that. But yeah, the removal spells just go too well. All right, now let's go to the one that you were mentioning before, though. So you were mentioning Gold Card versus kind of the Myers Grasp line, and this pack features both. It's got Atris as well as Shullkraken, Ferris Band Brawler, Staggering Insight, and the commons, it has Myers Grasp and Erosis Blessing, both in here. There's also a Blight Breath Cataclysm of note, but you're not taking that over Myers Grasp. So here you've got Atris, Myers Grasp. If you're going to stay gold, you could consider Staggering Insight, and then I mentioned the Brawler and the Kraken.
Yeah.
You said you like Atris here?
Atris is just so good. 4-mana, 3/2 Menace that gives you like a mini Factor Fiction when you play it is a really strong card. And creatures in this format with good enter the battlefield abilities are super valuable, especially when they are black, or in this case, multicolor with black, because Omen of Death is, Rise to Glory, Binding of the Titans. There's just like a lot of ways to bring these cards back. Acolyte of Affliction too. So when you first pick an Atris, you just get to prioritize Omen of Death and have 2 Omen of Death in your deck. And it's just a really strong set of cards to combine together.
Yeah, Atris's extra cards of the pile that you don't choose go to the graveyard. And then a lot of times Atris ends up in the graveyard as well, and you can, leverage that.
Also, when you're comparing Bronze-Hide Lion, Staggering Insight, and Atris, part of the reason not to take Insight or Bronze-Hide Lion is because they're gold. Atris is gold, but it's slightly lessened because Atris is splashable. You don't want to splash Bronze-Hide Lion. You definitely don't want to splash Staggering Insight under most circumstances. So getting to take this gold card, which I have, been perfectly happy to splash in like black-green, for example, or blue-green or whatever the color pair is really great.
Yeah, I would take Atris as well. Okay, let's get into our main discussion here. And by the way, thanks to everybody who interacts with us on social media and asks us questions and stuff. We think it's cool that you choose to do that, and we answer as often as we can, although that is not 100%, unfortunately.
Another thing to note, just so people know, is if I go and I see that like Ben S. and Marshall have already answered it, then I'm a little less inclined to, especially if I'm going to say the same thing. So more likely, if Ben's already answered it, I'm not going to say anything. And then, when
was that a beat? Was that a beat?
No, I was explaining why sometimes I wouldn't answer the question once Ben's already answered it, because I don't want to just agree with him.
But also because he answers every single question correctly.
He does tend to answer them correctly, which is why, again, like I said, when Ben answers the question.
Yeah, okay, we get it, yeah.
Specifically Ben, when Ben answers the question.
No, I heard it. My name was not on that list of people who answer the questions correctly. I get it now. I guess I asked for
Sometimes
that.
you just have to explain the beat, because your intended audience isn't even able to understand it.
Is this what it feels like to be BK? Because this is not fun.
I don't know. I've been off the chain recently.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk aggro in Theros Beyond Death. We should start with the big picture here. Is aggro viable in Theros Beyond Death?
Oh, I think aggro is quite good. Mm-hmm. It's part of why I've been enjoying the format, because there are more slogfests than not, or long games that go to decking, or and things go really deep, all that stuff, than not. I mean, that is more of this format, but it's definitely not the only thing that's going on, and aggro helps keep you on your toes. I also struggle with the perception that look, I'm not going to lie and say that I enjoy or you enjoy drafting aggro more than drafting control, mm-hmm. but I think people have this there's no shade of nuance where people think, oh, you never draft aggro because you don't like it. And that's not true. Especially if you look at when there's high stakes, I frequently draft aggro because if I think that's what's open or I think that's what's right to do, I'll do it. Mm-hmm. I don't have a whole lot of I think people especially people who haven't really competed at a really high, in a really big tournament or something like that. They see a lot of us talking on the podcast or on streams or in videos where we'll do stuff like take Enigmatic Incarnation over Mire's Grasp because it's wow, this is going to be sweet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's my mindset when I'm playing competitively is not like that. And when I'm trying to impart information on the podcast, it's definitely not like that. I want to give you, I think, the best chance to win. We'll talk mm-hmm. about the things that are fun and sweet because that's part of what makes Magic great. But I do want to caution you from thinking that carries over to when we're attempting to maximize our win percentage.
Yeah, so, a lot of that's just our personalities coming through on the things.
For sure, and I think that's good. It's good that you have a sense of what our personality is like, because that means we're doing our job. But I also just want to make it clear, because I think that we just hear this feedback over and over again. That oh, you don't like aggro, so you think it sucks, and it's right. I think that there's a lot less of that going on than people tend to assume.
Yeah, I played a red-white deck on Magic Online, and my opponent was like, "What?" They're like, "You drafted this?" I'm like, "Yes, my deck is awesome. Watch this."
Yeah. So, with that being said, drafting aggro in this format can be very rewarding, and is largely based in white. White is the best aggro color, and that's what white does best. Though part of the thing that's cool is white, I think, does feature nicely in control decks as well. But white-based aggro decks, especially heavy white decks, tend to, I think, do pretty well. Mm-hmm. The optimal kind of setup I've found, like I mentioned earlier, is something like 3 to 5 non-white cards and the rest be white cards, and something like an 11-6 or 10-7 mana base most of the time. Or, something like 10-6, because you can also just play 16 land. So it's the sort of thing where you really want to take a bunch of cheap creatures and especially Hero of the Pride, and then kind of just play to the board, use the ample removal spells to get their stuff out of the way, and then to finish them off with pump spells. There's a couple different ways these decks approach it. So we'll look at the different aggro decks. I did want to talk about a white pick order here.
Okay. So this is sort of how you prioritize the white cards in general for aggro decks?
Yeah, this is, and part of this is also, I would switch this pick order up a little bit if in the beginning of the draft, because in the beginning of the draft, I think I think at just about any point you're going to take Dreadful Apathy over the rest of the white commons. There's a tipping point where you might take Heliod's Pilgrim over Apathy, like you already have 2 Dreadful Apathies, mm-hmm. and you have some other good targets, and Heliod's Pilgrim just becomes that, but better. Mm-hmm. But in general, you want Apathy. But here I have Daybreak Chimera listed pretty high. I actually have it second over Apathy. Mm-hmm. But if I had a Mire's Grasp and an Apathy, there's no way I'm taking Daybreak Chimera over Heliod's Pilgrim. And in fact, right. if I just had Apathy and even not a Mire's Grasp, even just another just reasonable card,
a Sentinel's Eyes or something.
Most of the time I'm going to take Heliod's Pilgrim over Chimera because Heliod's Pilgrim is just a better card in more decks. But let's say you started with like anything like leaning aggressive, then Daybreak Chimera does tend to be better because curving into Daybreak Chimera is very good. Mm-hmm. So I have the rough order being Dreadful Apathy followed by Daybreak Chimera / Heliod's Pilgrim. These are really close, and I'm not sure where the tipping point is. Once you're aggressive, you're going to want the Chimera more most of the time, especially if you have like Daxos or some one drops. Like because if you have like the Alseid, the 1/1 lifelinker that can give protection, which is a great card, you want then Chimera gets even better because you can often go Alseid into 2-drop into Chimera on turn 3,
which is gross.
And and it's just disgusting. Then you have Hero of the Pride. I think Hero of the Pride is pretty important to these decks. It's just a 2-mana 2/2, which is already great, and then it gives you, it becomes a 3/2 when you play a pump spell, but it also makes all your other stuff deal just like a little bit more damage, and it ends up working out pretty nicely. Then Sentinel's Eye is a card that is really overperformed. That card is just really strong, and part of how aggro kind of keeps the pressure on because they kill your stuff, and then you play it, but all your stuff kind of has +1/+1 because you keep bringing back Sentinel's Eyes, and obviously a great combo with Hero of the Pride. Omen, and then past that, there's like a little break because I think now you have more information about your deck because you're not first picking Omen of the Sun or Karamitra's Blessing, right? You're never going to be in that situation, really.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So once you know where you're going, Omen of the Sun becomes more important in like red-white where you're going wide, whereas Karamitra's Blessing is a really important card in white-green and blue-white when you're trying to like suit something up and then protect it.
Right.
I have Revoke Existence below those two cards. I don't actually prioritize Revoke in these aggressive decks. I don't think it's something you need to pick up. I'm not saying don't play it. I would tend to play Revoke Existence, the first one especially. But aggro decks more so than control decks get punished when they draw situational or dead cards because they're really trying to put on the pressure and they need this mix of creatures plus pump spells plus removal, right? Sometimes you draw Revoke and it's none of those things because you're playing against a deck that just didn't play an enchantment. And that can cost you the game in a way that is less likely to be the case in a control deck that's seeing more cards, that is reacting rather than trying to be proactive and put stuff on the board. So I would, I think Revoke is like a little better than like Leonin of the Lost Pride or Pious Wayfarer, but I've taken both of those cards over Revoke. And I suspect I will do so again.
For curve considerations and all that.
Yeah, I mean, those cards are important because they fill out your curve, but also just because I want to play 16 creatures, 4 removal spells and 3 pump spells, and Revoke sometimes just doesn't slot into those because it's not always related. So
you said you have Pious Wayfarer, Sunmane Pegasus, and Flicker of Fate to kind of round out the bottom of the pick order.
Yeah, and again, don't take this order as gospel in and of itself because again, by the time you know you're going to take select a Pious Wayfarer or Sunmane Pegasus, you'll know whether you're like blue-white tons of enchantments that wants the Pious Wayfarer, or you're playing like red-white and you don't have enough enchantments and Sunmane Pegasus as a flyer is a lot better.
Yeah, and we're going to go over that for each of the color combinations that we considered the aggressive decks in the format, and that's going to come up.
And
you'll know.
Yeah, and of course, when we go over these color combinations, it doesn't mean to say that these are always aggressive or that you can't draft aggro outside of these. But I think that like black-green, for example, can be aggressive, but like 90% of the time it won't be.
Right, but and so these are the decks that you'll see draft in and draft out will be the most aggressive.
Right. Like red-white control is a possibility, but again, 90% of the time it will be aggressive. Whereas, sure, the black-green deck can end up with double Horn Beetle, some Myers Grasps and Lozum Chimeras and just swing for the fences. But I think in general, you're going to end up aggressive in these color combinations more often than not. And let's start at the top. Let's start with red-white. I think this is the best one.
Yes.
And when I say red-white, you do want to try to play more white cards. And the reason specifically that we're saying this is Daybreak Chimera rewards you for all your low drops being white.
Yes.
Curving Incendiary Oracle, into a white card doesn't mean you can play your Chimera for cheap. It just it doesn't help there. And also it reduces the odds that you're like if you have like a 9-8 split, you're like a little bit more likely to draw the wrong combination of lands instead of like a 10-7 or even 11-6. So what you're going to want ideally is, like I said, like 5-ish red cards, like double Wrap in Flames. Wrap in Flames is really important for this deck because what you end up doing most often is targeting 2 of their things and then your Hero of the Pride or Hero of the Games, the red or white or the flyer Hero of the Winds, like all of those things, because then it gives your whole team +1/+0. And I think intentionally all those things have 2 toughness or more. So you end up in a spot where your whole team is getting +1/+0. Sometimes you just target 2 of your heroes, give your whole team +2/+0, then remove 1 of their blockers. You actually have to kind of do the math in your head because different permutations, will lead to more damage output depending on what the board state looks like. But it is a powerful combination. The red cards you want are, Erois' Blessing, Wrap in Flames. So again, you're playing red more for the removal spells than you are for your curve. Because again, you do want to curve white creatures out with Hero of the Games and Heroes of the Revel, the 2 heroes being especially good here. And also you can get them pretty late, especially Hero of the Games, because most of the other decks don't want this card.
I don't think any of the other decks actually play it. Yeah, blue-red doesn't play it.
You really wouldn't play it in basically any other deck. But past that, you don't actually want that many of the red cards. I mean, Underworld Ragehound is fine. Again, you'll play it if you're in a more evenly split deck, but you would prefer not to kind of end up there.
To be able to play white cards in that slot instead.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Aspect of the Manticore is a fine trick too.
It is.
It doesn't give you as much toughness as Indomitable Will, but it can punch up. It can defeat a 4/4 green creature a little bit better. And if you can have some evasion or removal, it punches for more damage afterwards. So I don't mind playing that one. You are going to go wide more often. You still can end up with the kind of like aura based deck where you're trying to pile. You're using Transcendent Envoy, putting some stuff on it, using Karametra's Blessing to protect it. Mm-hmm. But more often than not, you're just going to end up with a deck that, again, has like 15 to 17 creatures in it. If you can usually just get 2 Wrap in Flames, because that's just not a card people value, and another, like a Dreadful Apathy or Rose's Blessing. I do want to note that Omen of the Forge is not a card that's all that great in this deck. It's first of all just not a great card. Like you're going to play the first Omen of the Forge, in all your red decks, but it's not a card I would prioritize because 2 toughness creatures are not what this deck really has problems with.
Right.
This deck cares about, Voracious Typhon a lot more. And because it's, Omen of the Forge is good at removing their like flyers or like utility creatures, this deck doesn't care about those things. It's going to be faster. So it's not a card I would prioritize and not a card I really even like all that much in this deck.
Yeah, of course, when you get up to the uncommon slot, you can really start to do the go wide thing with Reverent Hoplite and Hero of the Nyxborn. Those are 2 cards that are very good at creating a big board state. And then, there's multiple ways to pump up the team primarily. You mentioned it multiple times, the heroes. But then there's the Phalanx, whatever it's called, the uncommon.
Yeah, Phalanx Tactics. There's also Anax Hardened the Forge is one of the best reasons to play heavier red because Anax is very, very strong. So I don't mind dipping a little bit more in for that.
Does Pious Wayfarer go in this deck? You mentioned it to enable the Daybreak Chimeras. Do you just play it? Like, do you need to have a certain amount of
I would like to have a bunch of enchantments, and in particular flash ones. This is where Omen of the Forge does get a little better, but like Indomitable Will and Aspect of Manticore, like you can end up in a spot where you're attacking them with like 3 creatures, like let's say Hero of the Pride, Pious Wayfarer, and just some dork, Leona of the Lost Pride or whatever. And you have like an Aspect of Manticore in your hand. It's just there's so many permutations of where you can put it to really get a good effect. So, because remember, Pious Wayfarer is any creature. It's not just this gets +1/+1. It's any creature. So you're able to use that to pretty good advantage in the middle of combat with these flash enchantments.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's been the one card I've had a hard time finding a home for.
Yeah, there's no hard and fast rule because it, again, depends on your curve. If I have 3 Daybreak Chimeras, I'm just going to put in my deck most of the time.
Yeah.
But I would want like 7 or so enchantments, like a couple of which have flash before I'd be too interested in it. Sentinel's Eyes really helps because that's an enchantment that kind of counts double or triple because you're going to play it multiple times in the game and get these additional triggers off Pious Wayfarer.
Let's move on to green-white. which has strangely one of the most broad strategic applications. Like you can actually take this deck in multiple different directions viably. It really kind of depends on how things get opened up for you. On one hand, you can go tall, right? If you will, cards like Voracious Typhon and Loathsome Chimera can come down and just create big individual threats, particularly if you start putting, auras on them. And you can benefit from that by kind of making like a big, battle cruiser type card or whatever and trying to protect it. But also it has very much a token making go wide thing similar to red white with, once again, Reverent Hoplite can come in. There's Siona, which is the uncommon green white card that makes you, it's kind of a combination of both things where you're getting extra 1/1s out of the deal as well. And then also there's just like a constellation, there's constellation cards in green primarily that pop out with Setessan Training and Sentinel's Eyes being really kind of the premium cheap way to enable those type of things. So it is interesting because there does seem to be actually multiple directions you could viably go depending on how your draft actually goes.
Yeah, the green white is not any one thing. Like you mentioned, it can kind of be like the 4-power creature theme, like Nessing Hornbeetle. It's uncommon, but it's one of the bigger reasons you would be looking to concentrate on 4-power. It can actually be go wide just fine. Siona and Hoplite, like you said, make this deck go wide, but the like Boggle style is particularly good here when you're like putting a bunch of stuff on Transcendent Envoy and just using, again, Karamicha's Blessing to protect them.
Exactly.
So the biggest challenge when drafting green white, and this is why like a pick order is pretty hard for this, is it's got these different themes and they overlap because pump spells are good with your, go wide strategy as well as with your put all the auras on one thing strategy. But in Siona, like Fit, does all those things. But what you're going to want in the draft is just really flexible from one draft to the other. Whereas sometimes Transcendent Envoy is great and you'll play 4 of them. And sometimes you'll want literally 0. It really depends on what kind of synergies you're going for. So kind of have a good plan, which you should anyway when you're drafting, but especially here, just know what you're getting into and know where you're aiming at, and also be flexible because it could be that like, I think I'm I'm drafting this aura deck, but then you just get past a Reverent Hoplite and the Hero of the Pride late, and you're just like, actually think I might just be better off kind of going away from that and more into the go wide version, even though something like Setessan Training is going to be good in both of them.
That's right. And, it's worth noting here that this is part of the reason why both of you and I are so high on the format, right? Because this is a feature, not a bug. The fact that green-white is draftable in 2 or maybe 3 different sort of styles and that there's a lot of overlap in those styles. For example, a couple of the commons that we just mentioned, Setessan Training and Sentinel's Eyes, are cards that go well in multiple archetypes here within green white, right? Like you still need ways to target your heroes if you're going wide, and they do that. You still need ways to trigger constellation if you have some random constellation payoffs. Guess what? They do that too. And if you're trying to go tall and build up the big battle cruiser, well, you're going to need things to build it up with, and they do that as well. And that is just cool. I mean, the fact that they found a way to, let these strategies within a color pair mix so much and have so much overlap is really cool. Like, to me, it's the thing that's going to stand out the most about this format going forward. And I think green-white really shows that the most.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts on green-white before we move to red-green?
No, I mean, the one card that I think that tends not to be quite as good in green-white as it would be in other combinations is Voracious Typhon specifically, because again, it's a double green card, and I don't want to play too many double color cards that aren't white. Where especially since this deck is not very good at escape, and especially not good at hitting 7 mana. So
yes,
I would much rather have Loathsome Chimera here because you're just more concentrated on that part of the curve. And then the other thing is that like I really just don't like Gift of Strength very much. I have not found this to be the combat trick you want because it's not an aura. It doesn't work with all your auras. There's so many good aura combat tricks, that you should just, whether they're combat tricks or just like pump spells in general, like I think you're better off prioritizing other things. It's not like you have to take these cards highly anyway. Setessan Skirmisher, another one This is the 2/1 for 2 that this one gets ++1. It's not like the Pious Wayfarer.
Yeah, with Constellation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't like it a whole lot. So
I don't either.
I've
never seen it be good.
Yes, I agree.
Every time my opponents played it, I'm like, no, not scared of that. All right, next is Gruel. That's red-green. And this one, very typical, like especially when you contrast it with like green-white. This one is a much more linear archetype that kind of shows you exactly what it's supposed to do, which is care about creatures with power 4 or greater, and it can produce a lot of them. In fact, I checked, and there are 8 creatures with power 4 or greater at common in these colors. So that's a lot. And the payoffs are very good. Nessian Hornbeal is one that we mentioned before. Furious Rise, that's the 2 and a red enchantment that triggers on your end step and lets you basically draw an extra card a turn for as long as you have creature with power 4 or greater. And then there's Warden of the Chain as the signpost uncommon. That's the gold one. It's a 4/4 for 3 with trample. It can't attack unless you control another creature with power 4 or greater. But these are all really nice payoffs for a deck that is really keeping things simple but effective, right? I mean, this deck does what it's trying to do, and it's not very cute about it, but it does hit pretty hard.
Yeah, this deck is not a low curve aggro deck, kind of like the white decks at all, where
right.
It
like
really
this
shines.
This is the Typhon deck, you know.
Yes, Typhon's great in this deck. This deck really shines like turns, 4 through 6 are it's like where its real big payoffs come down. Though there's a lot of good 3-drops for this deck as well. Nessian Hornbeetle is by far the best in this deck and like the best card for this deck. It's just so absurdly good. It's like a 2-mana 5/5 is kind of what it feels like. And this deck really cares about the cutoff between 3 and 4 power. This is why, Loathsome Chimera, besides just being a good card, is just fantastic for this deck, whereas Stampede Rider is just not that good. That's the 3-mana, essentially 3/4, 2/3 that gets ++1. Note the Stampede Rider triggers on their turn too. It's kind of weird. So,
I know, it's very annoying on Magic Online when it keeps triggering all the time. But,
It's a defensive 3/4 as well. Here, like with any aggro deck or any deck in general, you care about your curve, but specifically you want to make sure that your cards are doing something. Like Skola Grove Dancer is a card I don't really like in this deck, even though it's a playable card, clearly, and it's like actively great in something like blue-green. Here, it just doesn't fit with what the deck's trying to do. The deck's not really that focused on escape. It doesn't have 4 power. It doesn't often care about enchantments. So, here's where you really, there's a dividing line between the cards you care about and the cards you don't. And not having 4 power makes it harder to justify that, where something like Flummox Cyclops is an overperformer here, because
definitely
you don't care about blocking all that much, and it triggers all your 4 power stuff. The other thing about the Cyclops that's funny, by the way, is because it so frequently can't block, I've had people attack a 2/3 flyer into it or whatever, some small flyer like a Vex and Glow into it, because it just never blocks, and it has reach, so it's never comes up, and then all of a sudden just snags one of their creatures.
I know, it's kind of funny when that does happen. Those ones end up being really important. The common 4 power creatures, the Loathsome Chimeras, and the cards that you can just sort of get anytime you want, which Loathsome isn't, but this one is, the Cyclops is.
We're touching on the more aggro focused version of this, which is gonna want to try to pressure the opponent. The thing I want to note is that this deck also can flip a switch pretty easily and turn into red-green ramp. And you want to always constantly be evaluating, because in the aggressive version, Nessian Wanderer, Nexus Wardens, and even the Elysian Caryatid aren't great. The Caryatid can be really good, but there's the more aggressive version of red-green that's focused on 3 and 4 drops instead of 5 and 6 drops. That's Loathsome Chimeras and the Cyclops, and kind of stopping around there. It doesn't want the Caryatid all that much, whereas the ramp version really needs it. Cards like Relentless Pursuit are a lot better in the control version. Kind of keep a running tally, because what's going to happen is there's this big group of cards you'll play in both, right? You're going to play Vicious Typhon, Eros' Blessing, Nyx's Herald. These cards are going to be great in both. You don't have to be aggressive or controlling. And then there's cards like Underworld Ragehound that are much better in the aggressive decks than the controlling deck. And then there's cards that are more expensive, or something like Relentless Pursuit or Chainweb Arachneer, that are better in the control deck. And so what you want to do is keep an eye on your draft and you don't have to commit to one or the other, though obviously at some point you're going to end up one place or the other. But keep an eye, and if something changes, you get to switch to the deck that makes the most sense. Like Dreamshaper Shaman, the 5/4 for 6 that lets you sack things to get other permanents. This card is a lot better in the control version, and this is actually a legit finisher versus something like Wrap in Flames, which is much better in the aggressive version. You have to know where you are, but you also have to be willing to switch when you open the cards that dictate that you should, because you're part of the strength. Part of the strength of being good at draft and understanding draft is knowing when you could switch and getting rewarded for doing so. So don't mentally lock yourself in one way or the other too much, and know, at some point you do have to commit, and at some point you are just going to have to bite the bullet and take Underworld Ragehound over a good expensive card, because it's just like, look, I'm going to be the aggro deck. But this in particular is a deck that goes both directions a lot more often, whereas when you're red-white, you don't have this internal conflict.
Right. The other thing I think about with red-green are Warbriar's Blessing is best in this deck. It basically will always win the fight. And also Setessan Training, really good to push through extra damage. The difference between when your creatures have trample and when they don't in this type of deck is huge, which is why I like Setessan Training so much, as well as the Nylea's, not Huntmaster, the other. I like that one too, but the other one. Forerunner. That's the one just giving trample to your big stuff, especially if God forbid you've brought back a Voracious Typhon or something like that. Then it just gets silly, but you don't even need it to be like that. Just even giving it to your Cyclopses and your Chimeras and stuff like that. It does really, really good work in those scenarios as well. So keep that in mind as a way to finish the game. Now, our last two archetypes that can be aggressive, generally speaking, are kind of interesting because unlike red-green, where red-green was pinned on a very specific thing, having a creature with power 4 or greater, and stuck to it very cleanly, these next two kind of threw us like, hey, this is what you're trying to be doing. But at least in my experience, having actually played the decks out multiple times, I actually don't prioritize the color pair's focal point, and my focal points actually ended up somewhere else. So for the first example is red-black, Rakdos. And, red-black, at least the pitch is, hey, this is a sacrifice deck, right? We saw the Signpost Uncommon cares about sacrificing and can sacrifice things. And you see the word sacrifice quite a few times in the commons and uncommons from this color pair. But it's kind of interesting. When I actually play the deck out, I don't play it focused on the sacrifice thing. It ends up being a happy upside, a little bonus, a thing that can come up every once in a while, a 1-2 punch of cards that I wanted to play anyway that when combined are extra strong, but not the focal point of my deck. I don't really consider these, I wouldn't actually call this red-black sacrifice. I just call it attrition aggro, I guess is how I'd put it. I want to try to take advantage of escape. And primarily, you get Underworld Ragehound and Underworld Charger as your two common, really good escape cards. And I want to use the black cards that enable me to escape these back again by filling up my graveyard. And I'm actually focusing on that. And then, of course, I get to leverage the great black removal and the good red removal to make sure that these Ragehounds and Chargers can actually keep attacking. But the sacrifice thing's on the back burner for me. How's it been for you?
I don't prioritize the sacrifice stuff nearly as much. And this is actually a lot like red-green in that you can take your core of good red and black cards, and then the last 5 cards you add will determine whether it's aggressive or controlling.
Right, exactly. How much sacrifice do you have? Well, I picked up a late Portent of Betrayal, and it's close enough, so I'll play it, and maybe I get to sacrifice something. Right. But that wasn't the point of your deck. Right.
And your Mire's Grasp was going to be good no matter what deck you're in, but whether you want Underworld Ragehound or something like the Soul Reaper of Mogus will change depending on where your deck is. I think you end up being controlling more than aggressive, but you can definitely be aggressive in this deck. And Underworld Ragehound and Underworld Charger are at their best there, which is cool because those cards, they're very good cards that don't always have a home, and this is a great place for them because you trade off a little bit of explosiveness. You're not doing the stuff like in red-white where you're, pumping your whole team with hero multiple times, But in exchange, your threats are all unkillable. This deck's actually really good against control decks.
Which is funny.
I've lost
you think,
badly when I'm like, wow, this blue-black control deck is sick. And then they're like, Underworld Ragehound on turn 2 into like Underworld Charger on turn 3. And I'm like, well, I can kill both those, but they're actually going to be able to outcard me in the long game, which is surprising.
Right, especially because of your expectations for what the norm is for that color type of matchup, where normally you think, I can outcard this thing easy. It's like, no, you can't. They just keep coming back. Yeah,
when you play against like red-white and it's turn 6 and you're at a healthy life total, you usually feel pretty good. Against red-black, it's just not always exactly like that. It doesn't change all that much, like in terms of pick orders. You still want Myers Grasps, and you still want Blessing of Erois and all that stuff. But in terms of the creatures, you do want to lean your curve a little bit lower. Catoblepus is like less of a priority. You want to make sure that you have the tools necessary to be able to kind of take your deck across the finish line. The sack stuff, I haven't really found it come together. I just don't think
it's just every once in a while. Yeah, it's
like
just
red-black is totally good. This deck is good.
Yes.
It just Portent of Betrayal is kind of hard to get to work. I think it's just expensive enough, especially since there's no free sack outlets besides like, rares like Woestrider, that it just doesn't end up being where I want to be for this deck.
Yeah, and it just doesn't happen that often in the format. If somebody steals your creature and then sacrifices it to Portent, you're like, oh man, like that is not. There have been limited formats in the past where that type of interaction was like, yeah, that's what that deck does, like bummer, but that's kind of the name of the game for them. That's not the case here for sure. Yeah. But again, the most successful builds I've had have been more towards the attrition end than the outright aggression. The key is that I was able to make it so that my Rage Hound or whatever could keep attacking. That's the thing, because you can bring them back over and over, but if they don't have a good attack, then it doesn't matter. Right. So you got to be able to kill their stuff or use a combat trick or just something to get the stupid things through, because then once you do, they usually outclass the other creatures and can just keep attacking, kind of for free. Okay, one more. Blue-red. So this is another one that to me is similar to red-black, although not quite as extreme, in that, this archetype ostensibly cared about us casting our first spell on our opponent's turn. But in practice, the payoffs for the strategy really aren't that great, particularly at common. There's just nothing, the Lionfish is okay. That's an uncommon, I guess. Or is it? I can't remember.
Yeah, it is.
I think it is. It is, yeah. So that one's just okay. But anyway, particularly Arena Trickster. Yeah, Arena Trickster, the 3 and a red, 3/3. That gets a +1/+1 counter when you cast your first spell on your opponent's turn. Has not impressed me. I've had decks with multiples of them that were beautifully set up for it, and I still just felt like it wasn't enough. It wasn't that good of a payoff. It was just merely okay. Instead, I want to use the fact that this deck was set up so that I could cast spells on my opponent's turn and use those spells to my advantage. Primarily, both the blue and the red Omen, Thirst for Meaning, Deny the Divine, Vexing Goal. These are all cards that I can leave up 3 mana for, and my opponent has no idea which one of these I could or will cast. If they decide to play around to Deny the Divine, I might be able to go Thirst for Meaning or Vexing Goal to advance my game plan. If they decide to cast something small, I might be able to get them with, like the red Omen, or I could draw a card. Or if they cast something good enough, I might be able to deny the Divine, whatever the card is. The issue is that they don't know which one of these things I'm going to play. They have no idea which ones I have in my hand. And I want to leverage that. And if I get some counters or some triggers or whatever on my opponent's turn, sure, I'll take them. I'm just kind of overbuilding around that specifically because it just hasn't come together for me enough.
Yeah,
consistently enough.
Blue-red is of the 10 color pairs, the one I have drafted the least. And it is not one I've seen all that often either. So I think it's just not one that you're gonna end up being in all that often. There is a good blue-red deck, and I believe it is the more aggressive one. So I think basically what you want is Stinging Lionfish to be good, which it is in an aggro. You want like Stinging Lionfish and Stern Dismissal to really pull their weight, which they don't in the control decks. Like Stinging Lionfish is just not that good in control, because when you have a Thirst and a Counterspell in your hand, and a Stinging Lionfish in play, that doesn't actually combo because they're like, go to attack, and you're like, all right, I guess I'll thirst. And I'm like, okay, play my spell. You can't counter it. That's not
right. Exactly.
That's not the combo you're talking about. Because I agree with you. If you pass with Thirst for Meaning and deny the Divine up, that's good. Yeah, that does the thing you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
The problem I've had with Control is I just don't think red is good for that. So I think in order to be successful in drafting blue-red, I would highly recommend drafting the aggressive version. I lost to it once, and it looked great. And then I drafted the only good blue-red deck. I drafted it twice. One was controlling and did terribly. One was aggressive, and I went 2-1 or whatever. But I thought it was good, is the key. In just looking at the way the cards play out, you want a curve of, mostly good red beaters, and you're playing blue for cards like the Lionfish. Vexing Gull is actually a pretty good amount of pressure. And then stuff like Omen of the Sea and Stern Dismissal. You're not going to want to really bank on like Naiad of the Hidden Coves all that much. And Ichthyomorphosis is still fine, but it's a lot worse in an aggressive deck just because giving them a chump blocker, it's like kill your thing, but you gain 3 life is not as good as you might expect in Aggro.
No, it also flies in the face of the instant speed nature of the deck, to have to be like tap out. So what I found is that it's a little too uncommon centric. The common payoffs I'm not
exactly
liking.
Correct.
Yeah, but Dreamstalker, Manticore, and Mischievous Chimera, those are good cards.
Yeah, those are great. Mischievous Chimera is a beater. Like
it is. It gets in a ton.
If blue-red is really open, and the only way to draft blue-red is if it's very open. It's not like one of these other colors where you can be kind of a little cut off and it doesn't matter because you open them good cards. Blue-red is weak enough baseline that I'm only going to draft it when I'm getting like 5th pick Mischievous Chimeras. If you just have a blue-red deck where you're the only blue-red drafter, you get 2 Mischievous Chimeras and a good mix of things. Yeah, you can really just Chimera into Vexing Gull, ping you for 1, untap, attack for 4, deny the Divine, Stern Dismissal. Like that can kill them very quickly.
For sure. Yeah, so this is a finicky archetype that can come together, but this is, I think, a big part of the reason why both you and I have sort of decided that we tend to avoid it, is you're telling me that, like, I can take a chance on a finicky archetype that I need to open good uncommons for, and even if I do, isn't the best deck in the format. I'm like, yeah, no, I think I'll pass on that. I can draft green black or green white or something and go multiple different directions, have some wiggle room where I can, just open up a bunch of commons and still make it work on some level. Where this one just sounds like you're stacking up too much risk and the reward's not there.
Yeah, so
I'm sorry.
One of the things that's cool about this format is, we just lifted, like, I think red, white, white, green, white, blue, which we didn't actually talk about here, but and green, white, red, green, red, black, and blue, red all have viable aggro decks. Some of these colors also have viable control mixes. But and then you have white black and blue green, which are great control decks. There is a good mix of stuff in this format, and
definitely
there's a lot of ways to draft these different archetypes, and some go, like I said, some can be split aggro versus control in the same color pair. Some, like red white and green black, are just very firmly in one side or the other. But you're not playing against the same stuff over and over again, and even in some color pairs, you have options, which I think is very strong.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of this has contributed to why the formats felt so fun. We've got a really good balance of colors, a really good balance of archetypes, and the cards overlap.
The balance of colors isn't great in the sense that black is really much stronger than the other colors, and I think red is a decent amount weaker. But I also don't think that that's the most important thing. I think gameplay is the most important, and the gameplay is very good, and the number of archetypes. Color balance doesn't impact the number of archetypes as much as you might think. So we just listed off all these different viable decks, and that is true despite the fact that black is overrepresented and red is underrepresented in general. But I mean, look, it's the same as true for Construct Unlimited or just games. Balance is less important than fun. Unbalanced is very frequently not fun. But fun is the most important thing. And for Limited, I think gameplay is where a lot of the fun and interesting decisions in draft is where a lot of the fun comes up. And those things can exist in spades as they do here, despite the fact that some of the colors are imbalanced. Like, a perfectly balanced format that isn't fun to play is not a good format. Balance is not intrinsic. I do not believe balance is intrinsically important to fun. I think that they go hand in hand a lot of the time. And on balance, you'd rather have a balanced format than an unbalanced one. But the way the games play out and the way the drafts play out is more important than everything being even. You can have uneven distributions. Okay. Like Cube is not balanced. Blue is so much better than everything else. I still believe Cube to be a lot of fun.
Interesting. Yeah, I never thought of it like that. So for whatever reason, they seem to have really hit it, though. I hope that they take whatever lessons they can from this set, because it really does seem to have, like, the things that have stood out from the beginning have stayed, and I really like it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's call it a show there, Luis. Good luck drafting at the Players Tour on the weekend in Phoenix.
Yeah, I hope there will be coverage. Two mono white decks with 3 Wrapped in Flames each, and then that'll do it. Well, that's a wrap.
That'll do her. Yes, we've got coverage there, by the way. I'm going to be doing coverage as well with a great coverage team in Phoenix, and we certainly hope you'll tune in for that over the weekend. Maybe get a chance to watch Luis play if he runs it up a little bit. In the meantime, if you want to catch us on social media, we talked about that quite a bit on the show today. You can. It's really easy. I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. You can also find everything related to the podcast, including those links and others, at lrcast.com, with everything right on the front page, and then a full archive of every show we've ever done on that website as well for streaming or download, however you want to get it. When it comes to the podcast, we try to make it available to you anywhere that is convenient for you, so you can download the show directly. You can, of course, use it for you can use any podcast app on your phone or computer to access, to subscribe or whatever, however you want to get it in that way. We're on Spotify, we're on Pandora, we're on Stitcher, basically YouTube with card images now as well. So whatever it is that you need, location wise, we hope that you'll be able to find it. And if there is a place where you're not getting the show and that would be useful to you, you can always feel free to let me know, and I can see what I can do about getting our show there. Because our goal is that it's accessible to you in whatever is the most convenient way for you to listen to it. We don't put up walls or anything like that. We just want to make it easy for you to get. The show is brought to you by channelfireball.com. I mentioned that at the top. Make sure you check them out for all your Magic needs. Remember, awesome free content right on the front page of the site. You can find articles and videos by some of the best Magic players and content producers going. I see right now on the front page, there's a Pioneer article about, by Andrea Mengucci, obviously one of the best players going right now. Same thing, Martin Yuza. Joel Larson just has he won the Brussels Players Tour, and we've got a report from him about his deck and how he won. So that's right there, the latest and greatest stuff about competitive Magic, and you can find it right there, as well as a bunch of videos from Luis and myself and other people actually playing the games out and talking you through it, so that if you're learning, you're coming on board, you're figuring this stuff out. Well, there's nothing better than watching somebody do it where you can actually hear their thought processes and watch how they play. All of that for free on the front page of channelfireball.com. Please do check them out. That's going to do it for this one. Thanks so much for hanging out, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right. Well, Marshall, I have a challenge for you. Since I do have a hard stop, I have to leave right now. I'll let you edit in a sign-off post-show. Okay. So I hope to one day find out what it is.
Right. Okay, I'm done. I'm going to do it. Okay, Luis is gone, and he tasked me with doing the sign-off this time around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you back to the three of the worst bad beat / judge calls that I've received in my Magic playing career. And these go back pretty far. So I won't do them in particular order because I don't know if one of them's particularly worse than the others. But first one comes to mind. It's in a GP. It's day 2. I ended up finishing 11-4 at this GP, and I in fact won the match that this happened on. But it was pretty unreal. This was during Innistrad, and there was a card that I don't remember the name of, but it was a white pacifism effect that would lock down non-werewolf creatures or non-human creatures. Yeah, non-humans, I think. But it was interesting in that if you cast it on a human, it actually pumped up the human. It gave humans +2/+2, and if it was a monster, basically like a vampire, werewolf, whatever, it said it can't attack or block, something like that. And I had a creature out that was a human, but it made wolves. It was like a wolf pack master thing from the set. And, so it would be easy to think that it was a wolf or a werewolf or whatever itself. So my opponent taps the mana for the enchantment and puts it on my card, like literally like touches the card down to the top of my card, and then looks down and goes and kind of pauses and is like, oh no, that's not actually a werewolf or whatever. That's just a human. The card that they targeted was called Kessage Cage Breakers. Actually, let me just look it up. I remember it now. Kessage Cage Breakers. So this was 4 and a green rare, and it was from original Innistrad, and it's a human rogue. It's a 3/4. Whenever Kessage Cage Breakers attacks, put a 2/2 green wolf creature token onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking for each creature card in your graveyard. So if you could fill up your yard, you could even swing in, and this thing could produce 2 or 3 or even 4 wolves. And so, this is obviously a very powerful card, and something that you wanted to do. So the other one was called Bonds of Faith. It's 1 and a white for an enchantment or enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 as long as it's human. Otherwise, it can't attack or block. So my opponent just gave my best card on the battlefield, probably best card in my deck, +2/+2, but they noticed that it was wrong, or that it was a bad place. So they picked up the card and said, and then moved it over to another card. And I was like, well, you already targeted this. Like, I have mana up. I have cards in my hand. Like, I would have responded if I had a response. I obviously don't. You know that now. Like, you can't change it, right? And so they said, well, I'm just going to change it. I said, all right, well, let's just call the judge. So the judge comes over and rules that it was okay, that they could change it. And I'm just like, how is that possible? Like, they literally put the card down on top of my card. Like, I absolutely had a window to respond to this. So I appealed it. I appealed it to the head judge, and they asked me some questions and stuff, and came back over and were like, yeah, we're just going to let them change it. And I'm just like, I don't understand. Like, I totally get the more leniency on takebacks. Like, that part I get. And this was actually before that happened, but I'm in favor of that. I think that it shouldn't be super strict if it was just a communication issue. But there is a line that gets crossed, and it's usually when somebody puts one card on top of another card and lets it sit there for a second. Like, that thing's been targeted. It's official. I'm sorry you made a mistake, but it was day 2 at a Grand Prix. So yeah, I did not win that judge ruling, and I was kind of baffled by it. I was just like, what in the, how is this not, like, at what point did you target then, right? Like, is it 30 seconds? Like, everything, I even said okay, and anyway, so I didn't win that one. Another one wasn't actually a judge ruling. I would just call it more of a bad beat. This one was during a PTQ season up here in Seattle where I'm at. And my opponent played a land called Halimar Depths. And Halimar Depths was a land from Worldwake. And it entered the battlefield tapped. It tapped for blue mana. And it says, when it enters the battlefield, look at the top 3 cards of your library, then put them back in any order. So you don't get to draw a card, or you can't, it has sort of this ponder-like feel, but it doesn't have any of the extra stuff. All you're doing is rearranging the top 3 cards of your library. That's it. But some combo decks played it just as a way to try to dig for the pieces or whatever for the next turn. My opponent, in the middle of the game, plays Halimar Depths, looks at the top 3, kind of scowls at it like, ugh, puts them back on top, picks up their library and just starts shuffling it. And I'm like, what are you doing? And right before they started shuffling, they were like, ooh, those were bad. Or like, oh, get those out of here. Or something like that. And I'm like, that was Halimar Depths, not Ponder. Like, you can't just shuffle those away. So we have the judge come over. But the problem is, this is at a local store. And it was a smaller event. And the judge didn't know what to do. So the ruling ended up being, it's fine. They just got to take, in the middle of the game, what was either probably 2 lands and a 2-drop, or maybe 3 lands or whatever, and just shuffle them away because they forgot, like, sort of mechanically. I don't think my opponent was actually trying to do it intentionally. I think that they just legitimately were kind of like used to playing Ponder or whatever, and were just like, well, I'm looking at 3. I don't like them. I'm just going to get rid of them. But boy, did they get away with one there. I mean, you know how it is in the middle of a game, 3 cards in a row. And then the last one's probably the worst beat because it was kind of the funniest in retrospect. But I was playing, maybe it was Modern, right when Modern first came out. And I was playing a Rug Delver deck, which was actually a thing at the time. And I loved that deck. I was actually pretty good with it too. Cryptic Commands and Delver of Secrets and Mana Leaks and stuff like that. And Tarmogoyfs. Anyway, and I had a pretty good start going against my opponent. And, every turn counts, of course, with a deck like that, because you can establish a board presence with like Flip Delver plus like a Tarmogoyf, and then you can use like cards like Cryptic Command to tap down your opponent's resources, hit them, and almost use it like a time walk. So sometimes once you get set up and get your feet under you, then you feel like you can't lose. And that's the kind of deck I like to play. And I'm playing against this opponent, and they came down, I believe, from Canada to play the PTQ here in Seattle. And my opponent's playing some type of Primeval Titan Valakut deck. And so they play a land for the turn and tap all 6 lands and then play Primeval Titan and say, I want to go search. I'm like, okay. So they search up like, a mountain and a Valakut or something like that. And then I'm like, wait a second. The land you played is Evolving Wilds. And this is kind of like whatever, an 8th fetch land or whatever it is for the deck. It was sort of like the extra fetch land that they played to go search up a mountain. And I'm like, you just tapped it for mana. Like you can't cast that Primeval Titan. So we call the judge. The judge comes over and determines that too much has happened by the time we call and they cannot rewind it. And I'm like, so my opponent just gets to go get like their combo piece a full turn early here. Even though like they literally tapped a land that doesn't tap for mana. And the judge is like, we can't rewind it. I'm like, okay. So I'm like, well, I still had this really good start. I had 2 good creatures out. I had a couple of counters. Like I thought, okay, I can survive the storm here and get the job done potentially. Although this is going to be a major setback. I didn't know how big of a setback it was going to be. My opponent on their turn untaps, plays the 2nd copy of Valakut, attacks with Primeval Titan, goes and gets 2 more mountains, does 12 to me or whatever. And I'm like, okay, but I'm not quite dead yet. Like I blocked or did something to the Primeval Titan, whatever. Like I'm on life support. I'm down at 3 life or whatever. And then they just go crack my Evolving Wilds, go get a mountain. And I'm like, oh my. So this is like the best Evolving Wilds in the history of PTQ Magic. It not only cast a Primeval Titan before getting cracked, it also got a mountain to do 6 and finish me off as well. So anyway, those are my bad beats. We'll see you next week.